There's a strange, almost magnetic pull inside the human heart. A pull not toward joy, not toward freedom, but toward the wounds we already understand. We rarely talk about it out loud, yet it shapes our choices, our relationships, even the way we walk through the world. Why does the familiar hurt feel safer than the unknown comfort? Why do we circle back to patterns that dim our light? As if some ancient instinct whispers, "Stay here, this you already know?" As Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And maybe that's where the story really begins, not in the pain itself, but in the shadow that remembers it. Because the shadow, in Jung's view, is not the monster in the basement we fear. It is the keeper of old maps, the archivist of everything we could not face when we were younger, softer, unprotected. It carries the echoes of childhood rooms, the emotional climates we were raised in, the first places our nervous system learned to survive. And what is familiar, even when it hurts, feels safe to the shadow. It knows the terrain. It knows the rules. It knows how to breathe there. But here's the part we often miss. The pull toward familiar pain isn't proof that we're broken. It's a sign that a deeper layer of the psyche is calling us back, not to suffer, but to understand. Pain becomes a doorway, a teacher, a mirror, and the shadow, patient and loyal, waits for us to finally turn around and ask the question we've been avoiding. What part of me still believes this is home? Today, we begin with the roots, because the patterns that keep pulling us backward rarely come from the present moment. They come from the emotional architecture built long before we had words, before we understood choice, before we knew that life could feel any different. And to walk forward, truly forward, we must first walk inward. Let's begin. If we travel far enough back into our own story, we find that the patterns shaping our adult choices were often written in the softest years of our lives. Not through dramatic events, but through repetition, the emotional climate we quietly adapted to. A home where affection was unpredictable. A parent whose love felt distant or conditional. A childhood where calm was rare, or where your needs were too big for the room. These early atmospheres become internal landscapes, and the psyche, like water, shapes itself to the vessel it grows within. As Carl Jung noted, the most important problems of life are fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, only outgrown. And this is the hidden truth of familiar pain. We don't return to it because we want to suffer, but because some younger part of us still hasn't outgrown the emotional world it was taught to survive. That world becomes the blueprint, the silent instruction manual for adulthood. So when we find ourselves drawn to people who make us feel small, unseen, or anxious, it isn't weakness. It's recognition. The shadow whispers, "This reminds me of home. I know how to manage this." The nervous system relaxes in chaos it understands more easily than in peace it cannot interpret. And suddenly, the hurt we swore we'd never tolerate again feels strangely inevitable. But here's the heartbreaking paradox. The shadow is not trying to sabotage us. It's trying to protect us with outdated information. It believes that returning to the familiar gives us control, the illusion that if we reenact an old wound, maybe this time we can fix it. This is why breaking cycles feels like tearing through invisible gravity. We aren't fighting just habits. We're challenging an internal universe built before we had the strength to choose differently. Yet awareness is the first soft crack in that universe. When we begin to see the origins of our pull toward familiar pain, we're not judging ourselves. We're meeting the child still living inside the pattern. And as Jung believed, healing begins not with force, but with understanding. With turning toward the wound gently, whispering, "You don't have to repeat this anymore." This is where transformation begins, not with rejection of the shadow, but with recognition of its loyalty. The parts of us that cling to old hurt are not enemies. They are echoes waiting to be heard. There's a moment, subtle but powerful, when you realize that the parts of you returning to old hurt are not irrational. They are following a quiet, inner logic. A logic built from memory, not from truth. You might wonder, why do I keep choosing what wounds me? But your shadow, that ancient repository of forgotten emotions, isn't choosing pain. It's choosing what feels predictable. As Carl Jung said, the psyche has a natural tendency to repeat what is not yet conscious. We repeat what we have not understood. We repeat what still holds power. We repeat what has not yet been integrated into the whole of who we are. To the shadow, repetition is not failure. It is an attempt at mastery. Because unfamiliar kindness can feel unsafe. Genuine calm can feel suspicious. A healthy relationship can feel like a foreign language your inner world has never learned to speak. And the shadow, ever vigilant, whispers, "Careful, this piece has no map." So you step back toward the hurt you understand. Not because you enjoy it, but because it fits the internal script you were handed long ago. Pain becomes predictable, and predictability becomes comfort. But here's the deeper twist. The shadow is not trying to imprison you. It is trying to finish a story that began years before you knew how to hold a pen. It reenacts the unresolved, hoping that this time, with more age, more insight, more strength, you will choose differently, speak differently, walk away differently. The repetition is not regression. It is an invitation. In Jung's view, the shadow is not darkness for the sake of darkness. It is a guide, a mirror, a teacher that speaks in symbols and cycles. And sometimes the cycle continues until we stop blaming ourselves for returning to pain and start asking what the pain has been trying to teach. When you feel pulled back into old wounds, it is not a failure of willpower. It is the whisper of a forgotten part of you asking to be seen at last. And the moment you turn toward it with compassion instead of shame, the pattern begins to loosen. The gravity weakens. A new path appears. Because the shadow does not dissolve through rejection. It dissolves through recognition. Long before you can name a pattern, your body already knows it. It knows the tightness before a difficult conversation, the heaviness that enters certain relationships, the instinct to shrink, to over-explain, to hold your breath without realizing it. The body stores emotional memory in a way the mind often cannot, preserving sensations long after language has failed. In Jung's view, the unconscious speaks not in words but in symbols, images, impulses, and the body is its first, most honest translator. That's why familiar pain feels so strangely comforting. Your body recognizes it. It has rehearsed those responses for years, maybe decades. Even if your conscious mind says, "This isn't good for me," another deeper part whispers, "But I know how to survive this." And survival always outranks happiness when the unconscious is in charge. Think of the patterns you return to not as weaknesses, but as somatic memories reenacting themselves. The quickening heartbeat when someone raises their voice. The instinct to apologize just to keep the peace. The urge to chase love that keeps slipping away. These reactions aren't choices, they're echoes. Carl Jung often wrote about the autonomous complex, a cluster of emotional memories that behaves as if it has a mind of its own. When triggered, it acts. You follow, not because you want to, but because the past is suddenly living through you. This is why familiar pain can overpower logic. It doesn't speak to the thinking mind. It speaks to the body mind, the instinctive layer built long before you knew how to reason. And until these old emotional imprints are brought into consciousness, they run the show quietly, invisibly, unquestioned. But here is the moment where transformation becomes possible. When you pause, when you notice the sensation instead of obeying it, when you ask, "Is this feeling from now or from then?" The body, once acknowledged, softens. The shadow, once seen, loosens its grip. And the psyche, once understood, begins to open its doors. This is how the pattern starts to break, not through force, but through presence. By honoring the wisdom of the body without allowing the past to write the future. There's a strange comfort in what we already know, even when what we know has carved wounds into us. The psyche doesn't measure experiences by how good they are. It measures them by how familiar they feel. And familiarity, to the unconscious, equals safety. Not real safety, but the illusion of it. This is why stepping into a new, healthy pattern can feel terrifying, while returning to an old, painful one feels almost soothing. As Carl Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. Facing the soul means stepping into unknown terrain. It means letting go of the emotional autopilot built in childhood. And for the shadow, that's risky, because unfamiliar territory means unpredictable outcomes. In familiar pain, you know the rules. You know how to brace yourself. You know where the disappointments land. You know the emotional choreography by heart. Peace, however, offers no script. Healthy love offers no roadmap. Kindness requires openness, and openness requires trust. And trust is the very thing old wounds taught you to fear. So the shadow pulls you back toward the ache you understand. It insists, here, at least, you know who you are. But that identity is built from fragments, old fears, inherited beliefs, unprocessed emotions that were never yours to carry. What if the pull isn't toward the pain itself, but toward the version of you that formed inside it? Because letting go of familiar suffering means letting go of the self you became to survive it. And that is one of the most delicate psychological deaths a person can experience, the shedding of an identity woven from hurt. In Jung's view, every transformation requires a symbolic death. We must allow the old self to dissolve so a truer self can emerge. And the shadow, trying to protect what it knows, resists this with all its might. But here's the truth the shadow doesn't yet understand. Safety is not the same as freedom. Predictability is not the same as peace. And familiar pain is not the same as love. You are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself who could only survive. You are allowed to meet the part of you who is finally ready to live. If you listen closely to the patterns you repeat, you may notice something unexpected beneath them. Not craving, not desire, but an attempt at control. The psyche often chooses familiar pain because it believes that what can be predicted can be managed. What can be foreseen can be survived. And the shadow, ever loyal to its ancient task of keeping you safe, offers you a quiet bargain. Stay with what you know, and I will protect you. Carl Jung often reminded us that the shadow operates with its own internal logic, one that doesn't concern itself with happiness, but with preservation. In that sense, familiar hurt becomes a shield. You already know its contours, the emotional temperature, the rhythm of disappointment. There are no surprises there, and for a psyche shaped by uncertainty, predictability becomes its own kind of refuge. This is why new experiences, even positive ones, can trigger discomfort. A gentle partner, a stable opportunity, a peaceful chapter in life. These things should feel comforting, yet something inside stiffens, unsure. Not because they are unsafe, but because they disrupt the shadow's illusion of control. Healthy love feels frightening because it asks you to surrender your old defenses. Inner peace feels suspicious because you've learned to anticipate the storm. Self-worth feels foreign because you weren't raised within its language. And so the shadow tries to guide you back toward the familiar, whispering, "Here, at least, nothing will catch you off guard." But this bargain, subtle as it is, keeps your world small. It trades possibility for predictability. It trades growth for repetition. It trades the vastness of your becoming for the confines of your past. Yet the moment you begin to see this, truly see it, something shifts. Awareness interrupts the bargain. You realize the shadow has been trying to protect a version of you that no longer exists. A younger self who needed familiar pain to make sense of the world. In Jung's view, the task of adulthood is not to destroy the shadow, but to integrate it, to thank it for its vigilance, and then gently take back the steering wheel. Because you are no longer the child who needed to anticipate hurt in order to stay safe. You are allowed to choose uncertainty when it leads toward freedom. You are allowed to loosen your grip on control when life offers something kinder. And perhaps most sacred of all, you are allowed to step into experiences your past never prepared you for. There's a moment in almost every healing journey when you realize something heartbreaking. The very sensations you once mistook for love were often just echoes of old emotional storms. The quickened pulse, the anxious anticipation, the longing sharpened by uncertainty, these were not signs of connection, but signs of reenactment. The shadow learns early to confuse intensity with intimacy, chaos with chemistry. As Carl Jung said, where there is a wound, there is a pattern. And where there is a pattern, there is usually a familiar emotion we've unconsciously labeled as home. For many people, especially those raised in unpredictable emotional environments, love becomes intertwined with tension. The nervous system begins to associate affection with instability, attention with volatility, attachment with discomfort. Calm feels unfamiliar. Kindness feels unearned. Steadiness feels dull. And so the shadow gravitates toward relationships that recreate the old emotional charge, not because it wants suffering, but because it recognizes the frequency. It seeks the familiar crescendo of highs and lows, mistaking that intensity for depth. The chemistry feels electric, but it is not the electricity of connection. It is the electricity of reenacting an old wound, hoping, this time, to rewrite its ending. Yet true love, the kind that nourishes rather than depletes, is not built on adrenaline. It is built on presence, steadiness, and emotional safety. But to a psyche conditioned by imbalance, safety can feel like silence, and silence can feel like emptiness. This is why healthy relationships may seem less exciting at first. The shadow doesn't know how to interpret the calm. It mistakes peace for boredom, stability for distance, predictability for lack of passion. But this misinterpretation is not a flaw. It is a sign of emotional recalibration, a sign that you are stepping into territory the shadow has never explored. In Jung's view, the psyche resists what it has not yet integrated, which means the stability you crave may feel uncomfortable at first, not because it is wrong, but because it is new. And every new emotional landscape requires time for the inner world to adjust. So if you find yourself drawn to the intense while doubting the gentle, know this: it is not your fault. It is simply your shadow speaking in the only language it learned in childhood. And now, slowly, you are learning a new one, a softer one, a truer one. For real love does not surge, it stays. And as you grow, you will learn to recognize its quiet brilliance. There comes a moment in self-growth that feels less like awakening and more like standing at the edge of a cliff. Not because you're in danger, but because you sense that stepping forward will change you in ways you can't yet imagine. And change, real, internal change, requires the courage to release identities built from old pain. This is precisely where the shadow trembles. As Carl Jung said, we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And part of that darkness is the identity we formed in response to the wounds we once carried. We don't cling to familiar pain because we enjoy it. We cling because it supports who we once needed to be: vigilant, self-sacrificing, silent, agreeable, guarded, invisible, or endlessly accommodating. To let go of familiar suffering means letting go of the self who learned to survive through it. This is why healing can feel like grief. You're not only shedding old habits, you're shedding old versions of yourself. The shadow resists transformation not out of malice, but out of loyalty. It fears that if you become someone new, you might lose the strategies that once kept you safe. It asks, who will you be without this armor? Without this story? Without this pain to define you? And the truth is, you don't fully know yet. Growth always asks for a step before certainty. It asks you to walk into a room you've never entered with a voice you've never used. In Jung's view, this is the birth of individuation, the moment the true self begins to emerge from beneath the archetypes, the complexes, and the inherited expectations. But individuation always comes with a cost, the death of the familiar identity. No wonder the psyche resists. No wonder the shadow pulls you back toward the known. No wonder old patterns resurface just when you feel ready to move forward. But this resistance is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you're close. Very close. The psyche only clings tightly when something new is trying to break through. So if you feel torn between the life you've lived and the life you sense is possible, breathe. You are standing at the border between old self and emerging self, between learned survival and genuine fulfillment, between the shadow's story and your soul's calling. And every step you take now, however small, is a step toward becoming someone your past never allowed you to be. There's a quiet, shattering moment in healing when you finally see the truth. The pain you've been carrying, repeating, reenacting, it didn't begin with you. It was handed down, modeled, imprinted, absorbed. The emotional patterns you now call mine were often formed long before your consciousness knew how to question them. And the shadow, faithful archivist that it is, preserved these inherited wounds as part of your identity. As Carl Jung wrote, the greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. And sometimes, what we mistake for personal flaw is really an emotional legacy. Unresolved grief, unspoken fear, unmet needs that were silently passed from one generation to the next. When you return to familiar pain, you're often returning to a family story, a pattern written in voices that weren't yours, a rhythm your nervous system learned before it could speak. This realization can feel both heartbreaking and liberating. Heartbreaking because you see how deeply shaped you were by the emotional worlds you grew up in. Liberating because you finally understand. The pain is within you, but it is not you. Once you see this, the pattern begins to lose its authority. You stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "Where did this begin?" And that shift, that gentle pivot toward truth, is the beginning of breaking the generational spell. In Jungian terms, this is the encounter with the ancestral shadow, the layers of consciousness that stretch behind you, influencing your present without your awareness. And when you bring light to these unseen histories, you are not only healing yourself, you are healing the line that came before you and the line that will come after. This is why your work matters, why your awareness matters, why your courage to confront familiar pain matters. Because the moment you refuse to repeat what hurt you is the moment you become the threshold, the place where the past stops and the future begins. You become the one who breaks the cycle, not through force, but through understanding, not through rebellion, but through awakening. And in this awakening, something profound shifts. You stop carrying the pain as a personal failure. You start seeing it as a story ready to end. A story you were never meant to keep living. You are the one who gets to close the chapter. And that is the beginning of freedom. There comes a point in every inner journey when the familiar ache no longer seduces you. Not because it has disappeared, but because you finally understand it. You've traced its roots, listened to its whispers, felt its weight, and realized it was never a prophecy, only a memory. A memory your shadow guarded, believing it was protecting you. And now, with awareness, you stand at a threshold that once felt impossible. Carl Jung wrote, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." And this is the turning point, the moment when your identity stops orbiting around old pain and begins expanding toward possibility. Suddenly, you notice the subtle signs of change, the small pauses where old patterns once pulled you like gravity, the breath you take before reacting, the instinct to choose differently even when your body still trembles. Transformation rarely arrives with fireworks. It arrives quietly, like dawn, unnoticed at first, until the world looks different without you realizing when the light shifted. The shadow does not vanish in this new phase, it integrates. It becomes a companion rather than a captor, a source of intuition rather than fear. In Jung's view, this integration is the essence of wholeness, not eliminating the darkness, but allowing it to stand beside your light, allowing the past to inform you without defining you, allowing your story to expand beyond the places where it once stopped. And slowly, the pull toward familiar pain weakens, not because the past has changed, but because you have. You no longer seek intensity as proof of love. You no longer confuse chaos with connection. You no longer bow to the identity built inside old wounds. You begin to trust peace. You begin to recognize real love. You begin to choose what nurtures rather than what repeats. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of living from your true center. When you step out of the old shadow patterns, you are not abandoning who you were. You are honoring who you are becoming. You are stepping into a life shaped not by inherited pain, but by conscious choice. And in doing so, you quietly shift the entire lineage behind you and the entire future ahead of you. If something in this journey touched a part of you that has long been waiting to be seen, stay close. There is more to explore, more to unfold, more of your inner world ready to rise into the light. Because the path of self-understanding is not a single moment. It is a lifelong dialogue with the soul. And you are finally listening.